He didn't even call it the fourth edition of Robbins Pathology. He called it the first edition of Robbins Pathology Cases of Disease. Again, single law. Again, single law. Look at the vision and the farsightedness of this person. This was not the old book just repackaged. This was a book which was written completely brand new. Again, single author. Now it was much more focused on mechanisms. General pathology increased by 50 pages from 500 to 550, which is where the basic discoveries in science was occurring. But he was not satisfied. He was not satisfied. The second edition of this book, he did something even more interesting and daring to do it for. Of course, his name was Randy Bertrand. Why did he take it forward? Robbins was very smart, he was very bright, he was very thoughtful, but he also realized that over the last several years, he has been removed from experimental work. He was no longer doing research himself. He became a full-time teacher of students, wrote a textbook, and he realized a book will not be credible until it also has the participation of somebody who is a pathologist, but one who is actively still working as an experimental pathologist. So he did Randy Bertrand to be his boss in the second edition of Pathology Cases of Disease. So here's Randy Bertrand, who joined him. I was in Boston at this time. I was in Boston in 1972. And here is Dr. Randy Bertrand. And who was Randy Bertrand? Randy Bertrand was as different as you can imagine from Stanley Robbins. Stanley Robbins was an American Jew. Randy Bertrand was a Palestinian, born in Haifa. Okay? And he went to medical school at American University of Beirut. Some of you might know it's a very fine institution in Lebanon. He came as a resident at Valley Institute of Pathology in Boston City Hospital, where Robbins was a pathologist there. 56 to 59 as a resident. Then he joined Harvard Medical School. From 1960 to 74, he was posted at the Boston City Hospital. In 1974, he became the department chairman of pathology at the Brigham Young Hospital, which, as many of you know, emerged to be one of the country's finest departments of pathology and remains so even today. But again, more than his biography, Randy Bertrand was a scientist. Randy Bertrand was a 5-year investigator. These landmark studies you may not know. You know, or you may not know, he was the one who was behind them. He was the first one to show the pyelonephritis is typically an ascending disease. Ascending nature of bacterial pyelonephritis in experimental models. He was the first one to show that the permeability of glomerular membrane is determined by the charge glomerular basement membrane. He altered the charge of this membrane artificially and showed by electron microscopy particles of larger size would either go through or not go through. With butyramine, he worked on acute inflammation. In fact, he was the one who first described that post-capillary venules are the site from where most accident occurs early during acute inflammation. And then, with Judah Folkman, he began to work on tumor angiogenesis. And finally, with Mike Brody, who is now head of pathology at Brigham, he discovered endothelial lesion cell molecules. But at the same time, he was a practicing and outstanding clinical pathologist, honored in many, many different ways. You know, many of you are from the US, you'll realize it is rare for one person to be the president of the 4 biggest societies in the US. He was what we call a pathologist. If any pathologist needed a consultation, they picked up the phone and called him. So how did the book change by Randy Bertrand? He added hard science in the book because he came from a strong scientific background. Cell engineering now had 3 pages of free radical engineering. Liquid information had now 5 pages of chemical mediators, which, as you know, are now become the targets of anti-inflammatory drugs. He brought a new vision to the book, and it caused a blending of Robin's style and Cochrane's science, and therefore a new, more exciting, and more innovative, integrating Robin's technology emerged from that. In 1982, when I left Boston to go to the University of Texas, Dr. Robbins retired from the chair of pathology at Boston School of Medicine, and he took an honorary appointment in Dr. Anthony Cochrane's department at the Brigham Women's Hospital. And this is a group photo of them. This is Dr. Cochrane, and this is Dr. Robbins here. And some of you who are regarding college might notice this Fletcher, who's still there. And that is a young, very young Chris Fletcher there, and several others, Steve Galley and so on. So as this was going on, Robbins writes another book. And the first edition of that book called Basic Pathology, and he wrote it along with Marcia Angel. Who was Marcia Angel? Marcia Angel was a medical student at Boston School of Medicine. Robbins always used to give his chapters before they were published to students to read, to tell them, does it make sense? Is it easy to read? Are there any problems with it? So Marcia was one of those students who used to read this manuscripts. And so, once she finished medical school, she became a co-author, but Marcia Angel is well known and famous for being the first woman editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. She's no longer there today, but she's now a professor at Harvard School of Public Policy. And if you look at New England Journal of Medicine, she writes on ethics and medicine and social policy. So, why did he write a new book? And so he says, in his humorous usual style, of books as well as men, it may be observed that fat ones contain little ones struggling to get out. In a sense, this book bears a relationship to its most substantial progenitor, Robin's pathology. It arose from an appreciation that the modern medical student's dilemma, as the curriculum has become restructured to place greater emphasis on the clinical experience, time for reading is correspondingly curtailed. And therefore, what he decided to do was to write a book which was not a synopsis of the big book. It was not just a summary of the big book. It was written with a certain different angle. Rare and esoteric regions were permitted without